You've probably heard the term penetration testing or pen testing. Let me show you the type of tool, or one of the types of tools that a penetration tester would use. So I've got this installed on one of my lab computers. The product I'm going to show you is called Nessus, and it's created by a company called Tenable. And you can go there if you want to. If you look around on this website, you can find a personal downloadable for home use version of this product called Nessus. Whether you do that or not, it's up to you. To run this, it'll be installed under Tenable on your start menu. So you want to run the Nessus web client. Now, what happens here? This tool uses a client server model, and we're actually running both the client and the server on the same computer. I'm pretty sure on the professional versions you could split those, which lets you start the scan running on another computer, and that's the server part. And meanwhile, you at your client can go on and do other types of work without being slowed down at all by the scan itself. Now, keep in mind that there is another computer, at least one other computer, and that's the computer that's being scanned itself. So that's entirely different from the client or the server. I have all this work running on this particular computer, and it's installed and using TCP port 8834. Now, when you open this up, it tells you there's a problem with the website's security certificate, and you should always be careful when you click on continue here. Now, we're okay in this particular situation because I know where we're going. We're going to the local host. So let's click on continue. So here's what Nessus looks like, and again, notice it's running inside of Internet Explorer. Now, let's set up a scan. I've already done one scan. You got to do one to verify everything works. Over here, click on New Scan. These are all built in, and it would be interesting to, I might do this later, do a host discovery scan or a malware scan. So there's some pretty interesting ones here already put together for you. In our case, let's just do the basic network scan. We have to name it, so I'm going to put my initials on this so I can keep this one straight. And of course, in the real world, you should really put a description here. And let me give you a little background on this particular tool. This was developed by whoever, and I'm not exactly sure who actually did it. But in the beginning, it was freely available. And what the developers found was that a lot of pen testers were actually using this while they were doing their penetration tests and making money on it. And the original developers were giving it away for free. So, of course, that doesn't make much sense. They were, the guys that were doing all the work weren't making any money. So they started charging for it. But there are added features you can get if you get the professional version. So I've set up a general scan here, and you can look through these things over here if you want. One thing I looked for earlier and I haven't found yet on this version is the ability to control the speed of the scan. You'll see once we run this that there's a lot of packets generated in a little bit of time, and that's that can cause traffic problems. If you're doing penetration testing, you're sitting on the outside, so all these packets are going to be launched against an internal target or maybe the web server, but still, it's at the target's at the other end of the network connection of the company that you're doing the penetration test for. And what you don't want to do is overwhelm their network bandwidth and cause a denial of service situation. And this has actually happened in the past. So being able to control the speed is really nice. And of course, if you were a bad guy using this, looking for vulnerabilities, you wouldn't want to generate packets at a very high rate for fear that you would attract attention. So those are both reasons for throttling this down, if you can. Now, if you click here on credentials, there are some of these tests that Nessus is going to run that if you can supply credentials, username, password, etc., you can actually get more information. As a penetration tester, technically you wouldn't know these. Of course, if you were running this against your own computers, you might want to experiment with giving it some credentials and see if, what difference that makes. But we're not going to worry about that in our case. So I've got all this set up now. I need to save this. So here it is, and the schedule is on demand. And now one of the things I didn't show you there a while ago, when you're setting up your scan, you can actually tell it what time to run. So you could set this up to run at night to get around the traffic problem, or you can click right here and launch it. Before I do, I want to show you, I want to set up something so I can show you what's going to happen, or what is happening. So I'm going to open up Wireshark, and I've told you this before, and it's true in this case as well. You don't need to run Wireshark to run Nessus. Wireshark has nothing to do with this at all, or nothing to do with what Nessus is doing. The only reason we're running Wireshark is I want you to see what Nessus is doing. So go up here to capture interfaces. So we want to pick the local area connection, and I'm going to click on options here because I want to show you that this particular machine is already set up with a capture filter. Now Wireshark will let you do capture filters and display filters. So I'm going to run a capture filter here. This is not TCP port 3389. TCP port 3389 is used by remote desktop. So if you don't put this filter in, you're going to get a lot of traffic over to and from TCP port 3389. Now this has nothing to do with what we want to see, so we just filter it out on the start. So go to click start. So our Nessus capture starts. Then go back over to Nessus, and little arrow here lets you launch. So click on that. So our scan is our Nessus vulnerability scan is started. You can see that from up there. Now switch back over to Wireshark and notice we're already up to 8,000 packets. Now this does slow down, but this is the kind of thing that Nessus is doing. And you'll notice over here there's a lot of send packets and SYNACs. Of course, if you get a SYNAC back, that means that something is listening on the other end, doesn't it? You'll notice there's a lot of reset ACK packets as well, which of course means nothing is listening on that port. And it's slowing down. So what Nessus is doing is Nessus has a database of vulnerabilities, and the people who develop and maintain Nessus reach vulnerability, they write packets that will test to see if that vulnerability exists on the target machine. So there's the first thing that needs to be done if it's if it's a vulnerability associated with a port, a TCP port, Nessus will try to establish the connection using the three-way handshake. Of course, if that fails, there's really no need to go any further. If the three-way handshake is established, Nessus will follow up with packets that are written such that they will detect whether the service on the target machine is still vulnerable to something, some sort of problem that has been found, and therefore added to the vulnerability database. So you can actually pick one of these out and to see how it works. And you'll notice it slowed down a lot. It actually generates 11,000 something packets typically on this type of scan. I'm going to go on and close this, or not to close it, but stop it. The scan is still running, I believe. The Nessus scan. It's almost done. But let's go back over to Wireshark. And you can save this. You can actually look through it and see what kind of interesting things are going on. For example, here, recall we're sitting at 7102, 192.168.7.102. The target was 192.168.7.1. This particular packet here was a send packet sent to port 8476. Now I picked one here that we don't know. Wireshark doesn't know what's listening here because it didn't give you a name here. But you can see the response back from that port is a reset ACK, so there's nothing listening there. Let's see if we can find one that's actually Wireshark has a name for. And you'll notice here, if these things here, Wireshark will try to name these for you. Usually I can pick one right out. Probably should go back down to the lower number of ports. You're more likely to actually have something named down there. Okay, let's look at this one right here. Again, 7102 is the source. Here's the destination. The destination port is TCP 3261. And Wireshark has associated, the people who wrote Wireshark, has associated something called wind shadow with that particular port. So Wireshark actually stuck that in. So whatever this is responded back, well, the destination computer responded back with a reset ACK. So wind shadow, whatever that is not running on the target machine. So you can go through here and look at all the sends and the reset ACKs, and those are all things that aren't running. Let me show you an example of something that was running, something I saved before. This is the Nessus scan of destination port 135. Now maybe you remember this is one of the ports involved in the exploit we ran using Metasploit. So there's the send packet. Recall that 135 is the endpoint mapper. Since this is a Microsoft box, the destination, it did reply with a SYNAC packet. There's your final act. Now, that establishes the three-way handshake. Then, Nessus sends this particular packet. This is what you get back, and there's the rest of the conversation. Now, I'm pretty sure our scan is complete by now. Let's go back over here. So it's done. If I click on that, here is, this is kind of a summary. So notice I've got, under critical, there's actually one. I'll show it to you in a moment. You can see there. And there's 6 that are medium, 1 that's low. These are just informational things here that you might want to look at. We can look at a report on this. So if you click on the drop down here for export, the HTML works pretty well. So does the PDF. I'm okay with the executive summary, so click on export. And it wants to know what you want to do with it, so save it and open it. Now this is a web page. So this is the report that was just generated by the scan that I just did, and go on and allow the blocked content. So here's my critical one, and I knew this already. Our target box here is still running server 2003. Now, server 2003 is now officially end of life. It's no longer supported. I've got the replacement for this machine installed. I just need to drop it in, and I'll do that over the summer. So that's that was flagged by Nessus as being critical. So these are medium, and if you look through here, you know, I was showing you the packets a while ago for the endpoint mapper, you know, the DCOM vulnerability. It's not listed in here. Of course, I was just thinking we could run this against that unknown server. Problem is, I'm having trouble on this particular machine with the unknown server as far as the mouse response. So I might try to install this another copy of Nessus on another computer. So just so we could run this against an older, more vulnerable machine and see how many more vulnerabilities gets flagged. But anyway, this is the this is what your report looks like. Of course, if this report was given to you by a penetration tester, you'd want to go through and check all these things out and take care of as many of these as you can. Now, sometimes you're kind of stuck with something, but there's a lot of these things can be dealt with. For example, I'm going to install another computer that will run a more modern operating system. But this is the kind of thing that a penetration tester would do. Now, this is not the only thing a penetration tester would do. There are other tools. Good penetration testers write their own tools as well to check more particular possible vulnerabilities. But Nessus would simply or certainly be a part of a good pen test. And I wanted you to see what it looks like. Now, again, I just ran Wireshark to capture the packets so you could see what's going on. If you were running this for real, if you were running Nessus for real, you wouldn't need Wireshark at all. But I do think it's kind of interesting to see what Nessus is doing in the background. If I get a chance, I'm going to set it up to run on a couple more computers, and maybe we can actually try it against the unknown server.